In the shadows of towering, smoke-belching factories and the echo of railroads crisscrossing the American landscape, a man stood, not with a crown on his head, but with the power of an entire nation at his feet. His name was John D. Rockefeller, and while his empire would never be one of gold or jewels, it would be built from something far more powerful, something that made kings tremble: oil. It was the 1870s, and Rockefeller was already on a path so dangerous and so brilliant that few could fathom its end. His wealth, already vast, was rising so quickly that no one, not even the richest monarchs of Europe, could compare. But the key to Rockefeller's success wasn't just his ability to amass money, it was his genius at creating something that would bind an entire nation, an entire world, to his will. His empire wasn't a kingdom bound by borders. It was a monopoly, a web of oil refineries, pipelines, railroads, and shipping vessels that would extend across continents, reshaping economies and politics. But what is it that made Rockefeller not just a wealthy man, but the wealthiest in modern history? How did a young man from humble beginnings, born in the backwoods of upstate New York, rise to become richer than any king who ever ruled from a palace? The answer lies not in oil itself, but in the vision of a man who saw the world not as it was, but as it could be, tied together by a single resource that everyone needed and few could resist. John D. Rockefeller's story begins long before the vast fortunes of the 20th century were even imaginable. Born in 1839 in Richest, New York, to a mother who was devoutly religious and a father who had a reputation as a smooth-talking snake oil salesman, young John quickly learned the harsh realities of life. The father, William Rockefeller, was a man who flitted from town to town, never settling anywhere long enough to build any true wealth. His life was one of deception, tricking people into buying worthless remedies. It was a dangerous game, one that would ultimately leave him with little to show for it, except a trail of disillusioned customers. But it was the mother, Eliza, who truly shaped John. She was strict, a Methodist who believed in the power of hard work and discipline. These values, instilled early, became the bedrock of John's character. While others played in the streets or squandered their time, John kept his head down. He studied, he saved, and from an early age, he was obsessed with making money, not to live lavishly, but to create something lasting. In 1855, at the age of 16, Rockefeller took his first job as a bookkeeper. A humble position, yes, but to John, it was a university in itself. He tracked every penny, studied every ledger, and learned the importance of precision and discipline in business. While his peers frittered away their time in idle chatter, he saw business as a science, a system to be perfected. By the time he was 20, Rockefeller had saved enough money to venture into his first independent business, a commission-based partnership in the growing oil industry. But the year 1859 would change everything. On the other side of the country, a man named Edwin Drake struck oil in Titusville, Pennsylvania. Suddenly, the world was thrust into an oil rush. Drillers and speculators scrambled to extract black gold from the earth, seeing it as a commodity with untold potential. But while the rush itself was chaotic and driven by greed, Rockefeller did something different. He looked beyond the drilling rig. He looked at the bigger picture. He saw the inefficiency. He saw the waste. He saw the chaos. And he knew that in the midst of all this, there was an opportunity to build something monumental. Instead of joining the scramble for drilling rights, Rockefeller focused on refining oil, the critical step between raw crude and usable kerosene. While others fought over drilling wells, Rockefeller began buying up small refineries, consolidating them into one enormous operation. He wasn't just refining oil, he was refining the very idea of how oil could be produced and distributed. He focused on efficiency, everything from the quality of the oil to the delivery system. He built pipelines, secured rail contracts, and created a network so vast, so intertwined, that it was nearly impossible for anyone to compete. But Rockefeller's genius wasn't just in his ability to control production, it was in his willingness to dominate every aspect of the oil supply chain. He would control the wells, the refineries, the pipelines, and even the railroads. By controlling all of it, he ensured that no one could cut in on his profits. He crushed competitors, driving them out of business by lowering prices to levels that smaller refineries simply couldn't afford. When competitors collapsed, he scooped them up, adding them to his empire. It was a ruthless game. But it was a game that Rockefeller played like no one else. As his wealth ballooned, his critics grew louder. They called him a monopolist, or robber baron, a man who cared nothing for the workers whose sweat lined the factories he owned. The government, too, began to take notice. Rockefeller had grown too powerful, too influential, too rich. In 1911, after years of increasing pressure, the United States Supreme Court ruled that Standard Oil, Rockefeller's empire, must be broken up under the Sherman Antitrust Act. The once great empire was fractured, its parts sold off. But Rockefeller's fortune remained. Even broken into pieces, the companies that emerged from the dissolution of Standard Oil would continue to generate massive wealth, cementing Rockefeller's place as the wealthiest man in history. But the story doesn't end with the breakup of Standard Oil. In fact, it's in the aftermath of this legal battle that we begin to see the full extent of Rockefeller's legacy. Despite the government's action, Rockefeller was not just a businessman, he was also one of the greatest philanthropists the world had ever seen. Over the course of his life, he gave away over $500 million, an amount that would be worth billions today. His donations funded the creation of the University of Chicago, the Rockefeller Institute for Medical Research, and countless hospitals, libraries, and foundations. His belief in the gospel of wealth led him to conclude that the rich had a responsibility to use their fortunes for the betterment of society. Yet, even in his philanthropy, there was a cold logic. Rockefeller understood that his wealth was a tool, not just for personal glory, but for influence. Through his donations, he shaped the intellectual, medical, and scientific future of the United States. At the height of his wealth, Rockefeller was worth more than $900 million, equivalent to roughly 2% of the entire U.S. economy at the time. Today, that wealth would translate to more than $400 billion. To put that into perspective, it's more than the combined wealth of Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, and Elon Musk. Rockefeller's wealth was so immense that, in comparison, the richest kings of history, monarchs who ruled vast empires, seem almost like peasants. And yet, despite his monumental fortune, Rockefeller remained a man of contradictions. He was a religious man, driven by a sense of duty to God, yet his methods were often ruthless, and his monopoly suffocated competition. He was a philanthropist who believed in the power of wealth to change the world, yet his entire career was built on a foundation of economic Darwinism. Rockefeller's legacy is a complicated one. He reshaped the American economy, created industries from nothing, and established philanthropic institutions that continue to have an impact today. But he also represents the darker side of unregulated capitalism, a world where monopolies crush competition, and wealth becomes not just a tool for personal gain, but a weapon. John D. Rockefeller died in 1937 at the age of 97. By the end of his life, he had seen the dissolution of his empire, but his fortune had not waned. His name remains synonymous with power, wealth, and influence. A man who, in his own time, was seen as both a villain and a hero. A man whose legacy still looms large in the world today. So, the next time you fill your car with gas or turn on the lights, remember the name Rockefeller. A man who became richer than any king in history, richer than the monarchs of Europe, the emperors of Asia, and the sultans of the Middle East. A man whose empire was built not just on oil, but on an unwavering will to dominate the world. And in the end, it wasn't just oil that made Rockefeller rich, it was his vision, his strategy, and his unrelenting pursuit of power. And in this world of business and wealth, that may just be the most valuable commodity of all.